And now, next up, we will be discussing hiring for diversity with is the topic. So Mathison, excuse me, co-founder Arthur Woods, a 3 times TEDx speaker, literally wrote the book on hiring for diversity. And guess what? The book is called Hiring for Diversity. Today, we're joined with Arthur Woods and PowerToFly co-founder and president, Katharine Zaleski, for this intimate fireside chat moderated by Katy Mason. And they are going to share how Mathison and PowerToFly are helping companies bridge their diversity gap through technology and what's next as we move into a post-pandemic era. So please welcome all of our speakers.
Fantastic. Where is the fire? That was like a good, I think we need to change that.
Love it. I know.
Anyway, next year.
That's right.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Oh, beautiful. So I'm Katy Mason, and I will take turns asking a couple of questions to both Arthur and Katharine and letting them answer those for us and take us through our time together. So I want to start with Arthur. Can we start by having you tell us a little bit about yourself, including where you are based and some fun facts?
Sure. Thanks, Katy and Katharine. Great to be with you. Hunter, thanks for that that energetic start. That's always nice. We're after our back-to-back Zooms every day, so this is great. Thanks for having me. So I grew up actually in an evangelical community in rural Northern California, in a pretty poor family, and I came out in the LGBTQ community halfway through college, which completely rocked my world and kind of turned all my my sort of original perceptions of the world upside down. And I found myself, first of all, on the path to entrepreneurship because I was really, kind of the conventional career path that I had in my mind was also pretty warped. And I found myself also entering, the corporate world after graduating from college and didn't really know how to reconcile my personal identity with my professional identity. And for years was not out at work, did not feel a sense of belonging at work. Really felt like I had to be kind of a completely different person at my job than I was at home. And so that's really what's kind of, propelled me into this work around DEI, around how to use technology to help people feel empowered and represented in their jobs every day. Very, I think akin to the PowerToFly mission. And I live in Miami today with my partner. We are both avid travelers and now trying to get to the beach as much as we can. So working remotely and doing this work.
Great. I want to hear from Katharine. What's the number one thing you are hearing from PowerToFly's customer in regards to their diversity goals during this unusual time where hiring is on the rise, but the pandemic is still a host of unknowns?
Oh my God. All right. Well, that's a great question. I, first of all, thank you all for being here and being part of the summit. And Arthur, it's also a privilege to be in the same Zoom room with you after seeing all the great work that Mathison is doing. So hopefully we can join our forces more and lift some more ships together. But to answer your question, what I'm hearing is that people can't hire fast enough or enough diverse candidates right now. There's huge pressure, obviously, across corporate America, but also, even mid-market companies and smaller companies are really looking at making diversity hiring core to their growth strategy from day one. It used to be something where, you would get like all your co-founders together who were all friends. Sorry, I'm having an air conditioning leak. Let me just turn that off. It's got to get service next week. So, you would bring all the people that you knew and you could work well together in the same to start a company. And then you would think about hiring for diversity later on. Well, you're seeing that happen much more from the get-go now, which is really interesting on the smaller company side. I would say on the corporate level, there's huge pressure to hire more diverse talent in large numbers, but the budgets aren't there yet. So you have, major corporations that are pledging tens of millions of dollars to different initiatives and marketing campaigns. And then you're still meeting with buyers on the DEI side who are saying, oh, we have a small budget. Can we do a test here and there? So I'm sure Arthur's experiencing a similar situation, but and it puts a huge amount of pressure on the people who actually have to get the work done at the end of the day. And it's not fair. I mean, their bosses are out there making big pronouncements, and yet they're completely handicapped when it comes to delivery. So, all right, leak averted, I think.
Yeah, no, I love
I might keep my camera off.
Trials of work from home. We're seeing the same thing, Katharine, and I think it's interesting also. Katy, I want to kick it back to you for questions, but the thing that we're also seeing is this urgent jolt to hire, urgent jolt to fill seats, without a lot of the long-term thinking about how are we building cultures that actually set people up once they're hired to advance, and how are we ensuring that our hiring process itself is accessible and is empowering, because it's so easy, as we know, to source. I mean, that to me seems like the piece that everyone wraps their head around. But Katharine, I'm curious how you're seeing that play out, just in terms of how are we setting up, especially all the amazing women at PowerToFly is helping, elevate, to actually be in the conversation, how organizations are rethinking their cultures too, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, retention is a big piece of what we offer now too. And we have a growing arm of that at the company, and really built that out in the last 6 months. But, especially, one of the things that you really have to do is when you focus on recruiting, you have to track hires throughout their employment history at certain companies as well. And you start getting that picture. And it's interesting to see some of the diversity reports coming out. I think Amazon, for example, published a diversity report where they only showed hires, but they never showed length of tenure, for example, which is incredibly important. So, but yes, we're doing a lot of training and a lot of focus groups, working directly with the RGs. It's
huge.
Yeah,
it's huge. That's so cool that you've launched that.
I just want to take us back a little bit. For Arthur, you are the co-founder of Mathison. Can you tell us a bit more about its mission?
Yeah, absolutely. So our mission is to really bridge the gap between marginalized and vulnerable communities and employers that have made this amazing commitment to, to inclusion and to equity, but have struggled. And so one of the things that we did when we started the company a couple of years ago is we started doing a lot of research in this space. And we recently wrote a book that Hunter mentioned earlier. And first of all, we were really thrilled to feature PowerToFly. So many employers ask us.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So we have a whole section. Well, first of all, we just talk about sort of what are the great groups out there that are helping employers lead this transformation. And so we have a really nice little section on PowerToFly, and it's just, to us, it's important to really kind of help employers understand this great ecosystem, because there have been real game changers like PowerToFly that are helping this work come to life. We've been doing a lot of work studying the systemic barriers that folks are facing when they walk into a hiring process, and whether it's a lack of structure or bias that's on the part of the hiring manager, or informal processes, because employers are trying to move so quickly that they're not always being very mindful of what can we do to make sure that this is the most equitable experience for all job seekers. So we've built technology that's centered around helping employers get a picture of their existing systems today, to understand where are we at risk when we're working with vulnerable marginalized communities. Where are we at risk of not being accessible or being potentially unfair or biased, as we're engaging folks. And our tech is used to perform functions like building equitable interviews, reducing bias in our communication, in the way that we write our emails, and the way that we write our job descriptions. And then actually also really engaging hiring managers, especially in training and awareness building, so they are great partners to the recruitment teams in this work. Because Katharine, as you mentioned earlier, there's so much pressure being put on our talent teams, but if we're not equipping our broader teams that actually sometimes are the decision makers in hiring, and are the ones who oftentimes are harboring the most problematic behavior in this work, if we're not equipping them to be great partners, the systems fail at that point. So it's been a really exciting effort, and I think the work is only getting more urgent for everyone, right?
Yeah, definitely.
I want to ask, especially the Equal Hiring Index, can you tell us a little bit more about that? And also in regards to allies that are outside of the community, that how are they helping grow Mathison?
Great question. Yeah, so we found that a lot of employers were at this critical stage where they were assessing, they were starting to look at their operations and realizing, okay, we have room to build greater equity. And many were faced with this critical decision point. Do we bring in a diversity consultant who will help us figure out what we need to do? Or do we have the time and resources to really do that? And so we realized that there were a whole set of practices we could help employers measure and index that could give them a picture of, where are we doing well? Where are we equitable? And where have we built accessibility? And where do we also have potential risks? So we've built this index, and what's interesting is it follows the talent life cycle from hiring to retention and advancement. And it's actually somewhat sector and organizational stage agnostic. So we see high growth companies, actually many of which use PowerToFly, which is awesome. They tell us great stories. And they're assessing their hiring processes through this index to figure out where do we need to take action? What are the most immediate opportunities? And one of the things that's actually coming out of this index is the ability to build internal transparency of activities that employers are leading with. So many times, and Katharine, I'm sure you have countless stories of this, there are great things that are happening in organizations and people's own team members aren't aware of them, Mm-hmm. So we've actually seen many employers using this as a system for saying, here's where we have needs, but here's also what we've already been doing, so we can bring the community along in those efforts.
Yeah, definitely. Internal, well, you're trying to equip everybody to do their own diversity recruiting within the organization, and scaling that up, powering that up that's awesome. That's great to hear.
It's been fun. Yeah.
I want to ask about the technology that's used by both Mathison and PowerToFly to help improve DEI. But of course, human beings are still at the heart of this. So Can you tell us the combination of how technology melds with human touch?
Sure. Do you want me to go first?
Sure, Katharine, go for it. Go for it.
So the short answer is that there's a lot of BS out there about AI powered diversity bots. It just doesn't, we're not there yet as humans. Mm-hmm. And we all know that if we have, inherently biased data sets already to work with, then how can these bots actually be working without being biased? So that's coming to light more and more, but it's a very frothy market. There's a lot of people trying to sell into this as being a technology only solution. And we had a leader at PowerToFly, Rachel Valdez, who's actually speaking at this summit, and she's fantastic. She used to say that we're hearts with, we're bots with hearts. PowerToFly is bots with hearts. So we do have a good deal of technology when it comes to, for example, we have to parse a huge amount of data when it comes to building talent pipelines. So, we work with very large enterprises and they want to make a lot of hires through our virtual events. So we have to put together very large data sets of talent. And so that requires, obviously, everything from building the back end to matching and sort of machine learning around algorithms and what these companies want. But we always have a human in the loop because we're just not at this stage yet in the diversity journey of the world, frankly, where you can trust technology alone. There's just too many fail points, and we're dealing with humans' lives and livelihoods. And so we just have to be incredibly careful. And so sometimes people say, well, you have a lot of people working in PowerToFly. It's very service-based, but that's really the only way. I mean, we've tried, and it doesn't.
That is so well said, Catherine. I want to like just echo that so much because we see some really problematic behavior. This came up in the research. Some of these AI tools and what they're doing literally is they're scanning people's pictures and names and then basically inferring ethnicity and gender. And what I really love about Power to Fly is that you've built a community. Like you really have built a community of employers, of job seekers, and of your team that's really kind of the champions of the job seekers. And that to me is that ecosystem is what this work needs. This idea of attributing race and gender to these things that candidates aren't even self-IDing to me it starts to become extremely problematic. And I think some of it actually could be very harmful. So for us, I think very similar. That what we're doing is plugging into social sector partners, and we've indexed 2,300 different groups across the states alone that are really serving different marginalized and vulnerable communities, and helping understand that if candidates are in certain networks and our job seekers, we can bridge them to opportunities where employers are not actually well represented in those specific communities. But I think we found the same thing that AI, just will never be the solution alone. There's some great things that can be done with AI around matching and around, helping understand specific skill sets, to specific jobs. But the moment that we start getting to identity with AI, I think it's a really rocky road that I don't recommend employers go down. And I think we're actually going to see some fairly big liability issues in the future. The more that some of these problematic systems are arising. So I appreciate the fact that Power to Fly utilizes a tech and touch model. We've found the same thing to be really necessary.
Yeah, tech and touch. That's a great one. That's a new one for my vocabulary.
I learned that way back when from Randstad, the big recruitment firm. I was like, they had this tech and touch. They're like, we're an agency, but we're
tech and touch.
Yeah.
Hearts and bots, humans in the loop.
That's right. Hearts and bots. Yeah.
Cool.
Just going back to recent global events, seismic shifts, Me Too and Black Lives Matter, and the pandemic, how have you seen the diversity affected by these events, and where do you see it moving forward for everyone?
Mm-hmm.
This is for Katharine.
Okay. Well, it's obviously raised more of the awareness that we're hoping for. And when we started this business a couple of years ago, you would go into rooms and people would try to explain to you that, the business was pretty diverse and they were proud of this. There were a lot of excuses made. Then sometimes you would go into rooms and people would ask why they even needed diversity. I mean, it's fine. You could have an open conversation about it. It actually sort of allowed us to have more productive relationships with people. But now, the impetus is just super, super clear. So, I'm just very grateful to people who are willing to speak up within their organizations and talk about. But I do think, I was reading an interesting article about how, what has the movement actually done for communities that really need, when you talk about, I live here in Brooklyn, for example, and, I'm like, I'm talking to corporations here in my house. I walked out down the street 3 blocks away, and it's a very different world than anything that would, it's far from the world of corporations, if you will. So it's like, it's sort of, we still have this huge disconnect where you have these big corporate mandates going out, but what's actually happening on the local level is not evident. So inarticulate way of saying that, but there's a lot of this. So.
It really resonates. I think we've seen it, all of this kick up in urgency, which is really exciting, but also it's created, in many cases, harmful and somewhat problematic behavior when employers, Katharine, I'm curious if you're seeing, a lot of posturing right now. But I think we're meeting a lot of employers who are keen to ensure that they're showing that they're making diverse hires without necessarily always considering why is it, first of all, that our organizations look the way they look today in the first place, and are these short-term initiatives, or are these long-term, systemic changes that we're making here? And I know that's the hard conversation, and that's the one that, a lot of folks don't want to have because it's complicated. It involves, social emotional change and systems change. But, we especially, a lot of what transpired in these interviews we did for the book came down to a lot of vulnerable communities, especially, communities that have experienced racism. Were sharing that they almost felt that there were kind of exploitative or almost extractive behaviors happening on the part of corporations when sort of coming in to source candidates without without actually building real partnerships, without building community. And I think that's really important feedback to relay, as we're having these conversations with leaders, to think about, how are we setting up deep, entrenched relationships that feel reciprocal, that go beyond the kind of near-term sourcing to meet that, next quarter goal, right?
Right. Yeah, woketivism is one word, but that's more on the advertising side. So
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely seeing more of a focus on hiring, which I think is great, but then also around training, when it comes to everything from training around interview panels to literally like how performance reviews are given, what the demographic data is that they're tracking in there. That's part of, it's part of the business that we're running now too, to really keep attention up, so that you can and do an NPS score, if you will, on new hires from day one. You have benchmarking around that, really know what needs to be changed. So yeah, the retention piece is incredibly important. And it's taking a huge amount of it, like change in investment and strategy for these companies, but it's about time. So
right, it is. And if the last year can jolt people into changing behavior, and it's going to take some time, that's great. That still is a net gain, to just have the urgency and the need there, and then I think it's up to great partners like PowerToFly that help organizations understand what they need to change.
Yeah.
I would love to ask, how can individual contributors help with the stakeholder buy-in for DEI efforts? And how can we make changes in the C-suite for greater diversity, especially for promoting LGBTQIA+ leaders? This is for both.
All right, I'm gonna let Arthur go first this time. So
it's a great question. Well, and I think the first to note is that many LGBTQ leaders today certainly feel as though corporations have, the sort of posture of many corporations has been showing a lot of support during Pride Month, having the floats and the parades, and sometimes believing as though because marriage equality passed a couple of years ago in the States, that kind of the work is done, and now it's just about sort of public display of support. And I think it's really important to note that for many LGBTQ leaders, and actually employees of all levels, there's still a lot of microaggression in the workforce. There's still many leaders who don't believe they can be out. There are still, in 39 states across the United States, there's still policies that legally allow employers to discriminate against the LGBTQ community. And so I think there's a huge need and an acknowledgement around the fact that our work is certainly not done. There's still a lot more that needs to be done in terms of building cultural competency for the community at all levels, and going beyond the Pride support. It's amazing that the organizations change their logos now for Pride. That's such a cool thing, but it has to really go beyond that. And I think organizations especially need to be thinking about policies and practices that are embracing the transgender community right now. I think that's a community that continues to experience a great deal of hardship in the workforce every day. There are so many employers that don't account for same-sex couples and their marital benefits, in their parental leave policies, all of the things that, from a systems and a governance standpoint, that are really critical. And then as individual contributors, it's continuing to be an ally for the community, and to understand that there's such rich diversity in the LGBTQIA plus community itself. And understanding that the nuances of each subset of the community are extremely intricate and don't always overlap. And to me, I'm learning, even just being in the community, there's just always another lens through which we can understand the community, right?
I think, you just hit the nail on the head. There's so much more to learn. And as an individual contributor, really raising your hand around education would be a great place to start. And we did some training around trans inclusion 2 weeks ago, and my business partner's wife is trans, and they've been, this has been a family in my life for the last 15 years who I've been very, very close with. And just even 2 weeks ago, just learning even more about that process. And Andrea actually spoke at this summit, but you should never be too afraid to raise your hand and say, I need to continue educating myself. And this is across the board, but I found that to be an incredibly powerful training. And I think people really do respond to that within organizations around really learning and so that they can not only be more compassionate, but also be an ally when they do witness microaggressions and really be helpful. And we have to take things away from like compliance training to actually education and having courageous conversations, and people will want to participate a lot more.
That's such a great point, Katharine. This posture of us mitigating risk is a very different composure than us becoming advocates. I think so many organizations have indexed to the how do we not get in trouble versus what's best for empowerment, and that it's truly leaning the completely opposite direction on the purpose of training, so I love that you went there.
And I will say just the training, and then we have some great questions, by the way, and I'm looking at the chat too.
Yes. Sorry.
It's awesome, but we'll go to those in a second. Thank you, Eileen, Sarah, everybody, Craig. But I did say we had a bit of a debrief about the trans inclusion talk, and some new people at the company said it was great. And I also said, it's actually helping me with my own, relationship. And I'm married to a, cisgendered male from college, but it's been, just going through these trainings myself have been transformative in that front too. So.
Well, it's a great reminder. And I feel the same way. Yeah, I feel the same way, Katharine, that yes, it's great to be in the LGBTQ community, but I certainly have, a big thing in this work for me has been understanding white privilege, understanding white supremacy culture, how it is imbued in corporate America, and learning also, yes, there's just, even in the work itself, there's just always another lens to learn. So I love it's a very humbling aspect of the work, right?
Yeah, no, it keeps life busy and compelling.
Yes, it totally does.
Do you want to read out Sarah's comment that what's been said?
Well, she actually has, I think at 323, Sarah said, this reminds me a bit of the human resources equivalent of rainbow capitalism. It's about supporting communities year round as an ongoing effort instead of only during Pride Month, Black History Month, when trying to make a specific quota. And then Sarah said, keeping our benefits applicable to families of all shapes, sizes, and makeups has been so enriching. It benefits everyone.
It's amazing.
We have some questions too. Do you want me to read them out since I'm seeing them?
Yeah, sure.
As the co-founder of the company, I get special.
This is great.
I'm looking at the live site.
Great moderation. I love it. I love it. Yeah.
Katie's doing a great job. Let's see. Craig has a more specific question around tech. He says, I am really concerned about testing apps like Indeed and what they do with our data. Do you have any insights into that? Are you talking about Indeed, the job site, or Indeed, is there a test? Because when I hear testing apps, I'm thinking of HackerRank and stuff like that.
Right.
So anyway, Arthur, I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, this is a big one. So first of all, I think it's really important to always read the privacy policies of apps. My understanding is testing apps or testing systems are not meant to keep your data. They may, I think that's an important thing to note. But there's a lot. I think one of the very important things is to be really kind of critical on the self-identification questions. A lot of applicant tracking systems now are asking self-ID data. So I just actually received an email from a colleague who said, I applied to a job and someone asked me my age and didn't give me an opportunity to say I prefer not to share, right? That's actually potentially illegal. And so it's really critical to, yes, always read, sort of the fine print on how is your data being used. And to ensure that if you're applying to a job and you're self-IDing, you have the option to always not answer a question, because this question literally would not let him advance until he selected a number, which is problematic.
Yeah, that's interesting. And yes, big pitfall there. You do out, yes. No, I think you answered that one very well. It's a slippery slope.
It is, yeah.
I will say though that I think there is a fine line between needing more data to help companies hire more diverse pipelines, and then asking people to give their data. So I often sort of struggle with people who are very anti-sharing data, even though they'll share data. They'll share literally what they're eating for breakfast on Twitter and like where they parked their car that day. But when it comes to actually contributing to some information to tools that will increase, diversity and inclusion efforts, they get very upset about that. So it's we have to have a bit of a healthy medium on this to move the needle forward. Like some things sharing will help. I'm a believer that companies want this because they want to create more diverse pipelines and they want to be able to open it up more. So I'm sort of on that side of that art of history, but I could be wrong, and I have been in the past, but that's where I'm going.
We have reached the end of our time, but are you?
Oh, I thought we were going to
take one more question.
340. Oh, yeah. I thought we were going to 345. Am I wrong here? I think we have a little bit longer. I don't know. Let's see if I
have more time if you. Yeah. I'm happy to stay on a little longer.
Yeah, we'll get booted out by Hunter, but well, Eileen says, what measures are necessary to address implicit bias related to diversity recruitment initiatives? Example, in my experience, female recruiters tend to reflect the same tendencies as female candidates in terms of leaning towards satisfying 80 to 100% of job criteria prior to apply for positions based on recent studies. All right, great question, Eileen. Well, one of the things that we do at PowerToFly is we actually recruit around roles, not job descriptions. So that opens up the funnel significantly. And we work with hiring managers and recruiters to screen in versus screen out. So we change that 80 to 100% criteria significantly. And we really kick it back to them when they're asking, when they're kicking people out of the funnel, the pipeline, if you will, because they're not meeting a certain job requirement. We will collect data on that and we will show them how often they're screening out versus screening in. So that helps for sure.
It's really cool.
Yeah. It's been a struggle, but it's working more and more.
Well, it's critical. And, I would just say that we found that a huge amount of bias shows up in the hiring process and the interview process where, hiring managers especially, walk in oftentimes off the cuff, not even sometimes remembering the role that they're interviewing for. And so they go off of, all of their previous old tricks with, questions that they would ask on the cuff. So we're doing a lot around how do you structure that time and how do you prepare for an interview so that you've predefined what you're asking and you're really clear on a consistent way that you'll approach it between candidates. And certainly then, I agree completely that so much has been, sort of placed on the job description and, oftentimes such subjectivity. So hiring for the role and not the job description. So many employers are adding all these unnecessary things. It would be nice if the candidate had, and we do know, of course, from so much research, especially among women, that oftentimes reading the job description, if something doesn't appear to be a perfect match, that can be a huge deterrent. So I love that you're hiring for the role and not for the job description.
Yeah. The other thing that we really focus on is trying to show candidates what the companies are like before we even ask them to apply.
It's great.
That's a big part of our pitch and inbound recruiting funnel, if you will. Sarah says, so what are your top things that people can do to help diversify their application pool and attract applicants for marginalized groups? Okay, so I will just say, Sarah, it's well, Arthur will probably have a slightly different, well, hopefully he'll have a different answer than I will, so I can learn something from him too. But you know, building up diverse candidate pools takes a lot of research and a lot of work, a lot of hours spent in literally putting together, you know, people that you can lists of people you can reach out to who have traditionally felt like they don't belong in these organizations, and for good reason. And so you have to spend a lot of time and energy on trying to convince people to even consider applying to these places. And so that's why people hire organizations like PowerToFly, because you know, we can put in the technology and the hours to go out and source those larger candidate pools, and do that through community, obviously the large community that we have, but then also do a lot of outbound recruiting too.
It's huge. Yeah, and I think you really hit the nail on the head there, Katharine. One of the things, you know, we're trying to be really mindful of is the fact that the inherent nature of reaching out to an audience that you don't already have represented in your organization is that there are blind spots, and there are, you know, and communities feel marginalized and vulnerable, and even the nature of you know, many communities right now feeling tokenized. And so I think just being really conscious of the environments we're creating for people, and the fact that that starts really informally in the early interactions. You know, so many employers we're finding start to look at their kind of formal processes, like, well, you know, did we send the offer letter? What did that interview look like? But all of the back and forth and the communication and the interaction we have with candidates, even some of the most informal aspects of which send a signal either that's empowering or exclusionary. And so I think trying to get employers to think holistically about the environments they're creating in their process, I think it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Do we have some more? I think we do.
Let's see.
It's great. Yeah. All right. Well, I think we might have gotten through our questions. So we still have 7 minutes left. So ask us anything. AMA time.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear a little bit more about hiring for diversity, the book. Can you let us in on the tenets?
And can we drop a link in the chat too?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, we'd love to. Well, you'll get a nice you can go find Power2Fly in the book too. So let's drop this in. I don't know if this will go out to everyone. Let's see. So that's the book.
Here, I'll drop it in the chat.
Katharine, we'll have to do a book talk and talk about all the work. So yeah, so what we did in the book is we wrote about really this conversation, you know, what for companies, for organizations that are trying to build more representation in their workforce, what's currently holding them back. And a couple of the big themes. One is we have to be holistic and inclusive in the way we define diversity, because so many times diversity has been sort of in the minds of leaders as just what I can see. So it hasn't, you know, acknowledged that we have intersectional qualities that make us more than just one thing. And that so many aspects of diversity, I know the rich diversity that exists in the Power2Fly community, for example, you know, there are so many things you can't see on a LinkedIn profile. And so we actually profiled over 13 different marginalized and vulnerable communities, from, you know, people with disabilities to refugees and immigrants. We basically walked through the talent life cycle from every step of the way, from the talent brand we build, you know, to signal to a candidate, you're welcome here, all the way to the way that we screen and select and interview. And it's written actually not just to make sense to a talent leader and an HR leader, but actually to make sense to a hiring manager. So even if you're an aspirational leader, or you manage a team and you don't formally own the recruitment process, there are tactical things you can do to be a great partner and be a great advocate in this work. And a lot of that is, I think, the message. We can, you know, kind of give everyone permission to be part of the solution. I think for so many years, this work has kind of been someone else's job, you know, and that to us is one of the reasons that we haven't seen the workforce become, significantly more representative in the last decade, and we're starting to see a lot of really great folks, many of whom are on the call today, raise their hand and say, I'm not formally a recruiter, but I can still be part of seeing my organization change. And that's what we believe is necessary right now to make this a movement that is sustainable, that leads to the change we want to see. So I hope it's a helpful resource. It is definitely, it's definitely dismantling some of the misconceptions that have been in the space. And it's all about making progress, not achieving perfection. I think that's very much the message I always read at PowerToFly too, of just, we need to, a step ahead is a step,
Yeah. 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
That's right. That's still one step. That's right.
Yeah, it's still 1 step, but or don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
That's right.
That's a great Obama line, actually.
I love that.
But I mean, part of it too is people will ask us like, oh, do you have a rule about working with certain companies? And I say, well, I mean, we work with, the reason we work with companies is because they need us to work with them and they need change, and we can't. We have to be able to jump into places that, historically we know. I mean, almost every company out there has historically failed on this. And so having a litmus test is very, very challenging, and it's better to just dive in and really get your hands dirty and try to move everything forward. So, it's good. The more people doing it, the better. So
agreed.
that's for sure.
Well, we're such fans of your work and all that you've built, Katharine. It's amazing. And it just, I'm sure you felt this year that a lot of the vision has, it's paid off when you see the world finally wake up to it being such an urgent need all of a sudden, so I hope you all are feeling that burst of energy and impetus around everyone trying to now take action, right?
Yeah, no, it's definitely, it's starting to come together. So
yeah.
It's
like where were you all 5 years ago? Yeah.
No, my phone calls are getting answered, that's for sure. But finally, but it's great, and it's great to have you all in the mix, and we should figure out how we can partner a little bit more too.
I would love that. Yeah. We were so thrilled to be able to just kind of highlight some of the great work being done. But there is a lot of collaboration in the future. I can see it.
Great. Yeah. See, like we're going to do biz dev deals here at the summit as well.
Hey, yes. Yeah. There's like total yin yang there. So that's perfect. Yeah, I love it.
Great. Awesome.
Any last takeaways before we close out for this chat? I mean, of course, we can talk for another hour.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll just say that this is Arthur pointed out the fact that like this has taken years for the world to start to realize how important this work is. And my brother-in-law has built a very successful company out in the Bay Area, and I always get a little jealous of him. And one day he said to me, you're trying to solve a problem here that's like originated with Adam and Eve, basically, at least on the gender front. So give yourself a little bit of a break.
Yeah, that's it's a really great point.
Original sin.
Wow, it's a really great point. Yeah, I mean, it's a great point, and I was actually sharing that earlier that we're not just talking about implementing a new system or leading some other kind of organizational change. We're talking about a deeply systemic, emotional, social emotional issue that has to do with oppression that's been in our system since the beginning of time. So you're right, Katharine. It's not an easy thing to dismantle. It's not an easy thing to rebuild. And yet it's highly necessary. So there's a daily kind of challenge of like the work being needed, but the work being difficult, right?
Yeah, for sure. So for all of you out here who are doing this work, we're doing it, we're chipping away, but
that's right.
The arc of the universe is long, right? So when it bends towards justice. That's the great line from Martin.
I love that. That's a great, yes, that's right. That's powerful.
Awesome.
I just want to mention we have a thank you from Tracy, who says conversations like this are long overdue, and thank you both for speaking today, and thank you for having me help guide the conversation.
Thank you,
Thank
Katie.
you so much
This is
for having us,
fantastic.
Katie. This was awesome.
All right.
All
Bye,
right, everyone. Good
everybody.
luck on the move,
Bye,
Katharine.
everyone.
See ya.
Thanks. Bye.
Take care.
Thank you, Katie, Arthur, and Katharine, so much. Be sure you can get Arthur's new book, Hiring for Diversity, The Guide to Building an Inclusive and Equitable Organization. Pre-order now, out August 10th.